It's a very common thing for humans to act differently around different people. Maybe having one version of themselves that shows up at work, at the office, another version around their family, another one around their partner or girlfriend, and maybe for different friends, they also have different ways of showing up, different topics they would talk about, different sides of them they would show. And of course, there is nuance in interacting with different people. We don't want to, speak to our girlfriend in the same way we'd speak to our mother. But the question is, in doing all of this, are we ever truly fully being ourselves? And what are the hidden costs of constantly changing ourselves completely to meet the needs and expectations of what we think other people have of us? So the topic of today is really diving into the dangers of this and seeing how can we look at how this shows up, what's underneath it, why we do it, and then how can we actually end up being more true to ourselves and more authentic in the eyes of others. So we'll start by sharing one or two little stories from our lives, at least, of how we definitely notice ourselves doing this, the hiding of our true self and then constantly playing roles to meet other people's expectations.
Yeah, as we go deeper, as you learn more about the Selfless Man project, there are different types of people and how they seek approval and get their needs met. Mine was very, very strongly the approval seeker for other from other people. And of course, I wasn't aware of this, how much I did that, how much I was looking at every detail, every body movement, every sign of disapproval in somebody's face. But I did, and that was so stressful. And the problem was, just to give one example, is that any text message, for example, from somebody that would criticize any of my behaviors or something I did, had the power over me to destroy my whole day or maybe my week. So to manage that constantly was so difficult. And especially for me, I had this huge life transition where now my life is so totally different than it used to be 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. And I was surrounded by completely different sorts of people. I had this travel agency where there was a lot of fun and party, a lot of, I would say, superficial interaction, alcohol. And then I moved into obviously the personal development space and the healthy lifestyle space. And then there would be new friends, different kinds of people. So this new version of me wanted to be liked by these new people. And they would look down on partying, superficiality. So with them, I would almost disregard that part of my past as, I don't know why I did that. And I'm not like that anymore. I'm better than that now, almost like this. And then when I was meeting people from my old life, where there was most of my network was from there, I would just say, now I'm also interested in looking after, because of all the partying, I also need to look after my body, almost excusing it, but I still love this. So I would really present a total different version of my reality depending on who I was talking to in order to keep getting approval of these people and no pushback. And of course, then that comes with remembering who did I tell what exactly. And it stresses me so much.
From my experience, I would say there was an unconscious question. Again, I was never really aware of this, but this is what was happening as a program in the background of who is in front of me and who do they need me to be? Or who do I need to be to win their approval? So if it was in a, let's say, romantic situation, it would be a need to show how great I am or how open-minded I am, or also how good I am at holding space or supporting people if they had some emotions or something. So that was more the mask or persona I would use in a dating or relationship situation. Then in a group situation, particularly when I was working, it was being in a, ironically, in a crowd, in a group of people when I'm on stage and reading the whole room, maybe reading 200 people and seeing who do these people need me to be right now? Mm-hmm. What's the exact music I can play that's going to get everyone to like me? So that made me really great at being an entertainer, performer, musician, because I was effectively a people pleaser with a guitar. So I could read a room, feel into and notice what everyone wanted, and then give it to them. And then they'd come up and say, oh my God, how did you know that, etc. Because it was like a trained skill of changing who I was and what I did in order to meet the needs of everyone around me. And we want to go deeper into why does this happen? Why do people like us learn to do this, because many of our clients also experience the same things. Different, whether it's an investor meeting, co-founder meeting, client meeting, or with their girlfriend or with their friends, there's a different version of them that's showing up. And for us people who are in these situations with many different hats to wear, it can be challenging. It can drain a lot of energy, and it can kind of leave us feeling like at the end of it, who am I really, and what do I really want? We're spending so much time focused on the needs of others, but forget about our own. So there's an analogy I like to use, which is this concept of the cheese and the cat. And there was this experiment that was done where they put a rat, like a starved rat, in a tube, and they tied it to a spring to measure how hard it would run. And then they would waft in the smell of cheese. And they measured how hard the starving rat ran towards the cheese, and they measured the energy output. And then in the next study, they wafted in the smell of a cat from behind it, and the rat ran way harder. So the example is that we often will run hard towards success, in this case cheese, but we will run harder away from fear of something, of danger basically. So in this example, why would people change themselves around other people? The cheese is being liked, being accepted. So if we've been conditioned to be the nice boss or the friendly client or the good boyfriend or something, then we believe there's certain ways that we need to show up in the world in order to be accepted and liked and loved. And we usually are conditioned pretty early to do this, and we never question it. We just say that's how we need to be. And we therefore keep everyone liking us, keep them happy, so that we can get the things that we want. So that's kind of like the cheese, or the positive outcome of this. But on a deeper level, what we actually more don't want is to not be rejected, to not create conflict, and to not feel shame or unworthiness. So they're really the things that are driving us. So we might say, I want approval, I want acceptance, but more than that, we don't want rejection. We don't want to feel shame. Mm-hmm. So that is actually the fuel. That cat in the background is actually the fuel that's often driving a lot of this changing ourselves for others. And that's why it can actually be such a negative pattern if we don't keep a track of it.
Yeah, again, interesting question for you to ask yourself with all the things we're talking about. Are you a person that is running more towards the cheese or away from the cat? In the context of approval seeking and changing myself depending on who I'm with, for me, I loved it if everybody liked me. It was nice, but way more important that nobody hated me, nobody thought I was a bad person, nobody misunderstood me. So for me, it was, in this context, also much more the cheese rather than the cat. It was, for me, the worst thing possible if any person in the room would think he's a bad person, this opinion of yours makes you a bad guy, and I'm going to tell other people about it. That was, for me, like death. I couldn't deal with that.
Yeah. I think that's pretty common for most people. If we ask them on the surface what's driving you, they'll say, oh, I want to be liked. But if you really drill into it and you say, how would it feel if there was someone in the room who thought you were an asshole? That would create much more strong feelings and emotions in them than the previous answer. Before we go into like what's actually underneath that, we want to talk about why constantly changing yourself for others is bad and what are the dangers, the effects of doing that. So the first kind of negative consequence of always trying to play a role for other people in your life is basically having only surface level relationships. So by constantly trying to predict what people need from you and give it to them, they're never actually meeting you. They're only meeting a hologram or a projected mask that you're putting out into the world, that you're doing to win acceptance. But by doing that, you actually remove the ability to ever have a genuine connection with anybody. Now, if you've been doing this your whole life, this might be just your standard for relationships. You might just say, that's what relationships are. That's my friendships. They're my friends over there. We talk about, I don't know, sports and the weather or whatever. But you're missing the opportunity to actually be meeting people on a deeper level and even liked, loved, or accepted for who you are. And that's really tough. Some people later in life maybe have this realization and say, wow, my whole life I was just pretending, no one ever knew me.
I think the most extreme version of that does come up in romantic relationships. So I noticed this in my relationship coaching, is that people who want to be liked in general in life, they put that mask even on more on dates, and then even more if they meet somebody they're really interested in. It's almost like they explain the more they like somebody, the more they try to be perfect. And that might lead to a few very good dates, but that also leads to big problems later in the relationship, because now they fell in love with somebody or for somebody they're not. So they are then afraid to show these parts of themselves that they don't like themselves, that they believe are too much, that they believe are not lovable. But the problem is, if you want to go through life with somebody, there are going to be tough times, and then this person should be the one actually where you can be yourself. And not being able to do that comes with all sorts of negatives. You might lash out one day, or you lose connection to the person. You're going to feel very alone or lonely even within the relationship, which is probably worse than being single and feeling a little bit alone, because then you know why. But if you are with the person you love and you can't connect when you really need it, and particularly for so many guys, it's like, oh, if I feel a negative emotion or something, that's weak, so I can't possibly share it because she will not love me then if I'm not perfect. And I think that's one of the big reasons, and why I'm saying to people, hey, intentionally know the things that are difficult for you to share, and then intentionally find good ways to say them on the first few dates, to already train yourself not to fall back into that pattern with the person that is closest to you.
Yeah. I almost have this image of, like, I don't know if this was a movie I saw or if I'm making up a great idea for a Hollywood movie, but guy falling in love with a woman who's just perfect and amazing, and then a while into the movie he recognizes she's actually like a foreign assassin from Russia or something, sent to kill him or something, you know? So this idea of like falling in love with someone and then finding out later it was all a scam. That's kind of like how most people are, without realizing, approaching relationships, because they start off on this foot of putting a mask, not being fully themselves, and feeding into, what does this person like? What does this person need me to be? How can I twist myself to meet those needs? But then they're creating then a character that they're casting themselves in that role for the rest of their life, potentially, you know? And maybe they can maintain that act for a week, a month, a year, or 20 years. But at some point, the walls have to come crumbling down, and that can lead to a lot of hurt on both sides. Resentment on the side of the person who's playing the role, and just, bitterness and confusion from the other person. Like, wow, I thought I knew who I was in a relationship with, but I didn't, and that's really tough.
100%. Like in the start, it's super easy to pretend, because we're like, oh, I really want this to work. So and it's exciting and it evokes some emotions in me. So I'm willing to make that sacrifice. In this moment, it feels exciting enough and like something I want enough, and I can't feel the cost yet. But then when life becomes more normal, the butterflies, the honeymoon phase is over, of course, true self, your real needs will come up. And then, maybe the partner is blindsided, like, you never told me about these needs of yours. Who are you? Yeah. And also then kind of being angry at them not knowing or not seeing it, and then blaming them. And it's just, as you said, it can be a week, a month, or for many people maybe even much longer, but it can't be a healthy, happy relationship.
It's almost like 10 years of being this easygoing, cool, whatever you want, babe, it's fine. And then suddenly, I have a boundary. Yeah. Suddenly all these needs come out of nowhere, and they swing the pendulum the other way because they've repressed it for so long. Which kind of leads to the next symptom or cost of this, which is basically a loss of self-respect. If I constantly confirm that no one wants to know the real me by playing masks and getting validated for them, then I'm going to never change that strategy. It doesn't then feel good to do it all the time. Like, I don't want to play a role for the next 30 years in this relationship. But I also can't change it. I can't go back, because the alternative is something that's too scary and I've never known. What if they find out deep down I am a fucking unworthy piece of shit? That would be way worse. It's better. It's like every day making the choice to play the role for all these people around, instead of take the risk of maybe being rejected for who I truly am. And again, that's a short-term strategy, which sounds great in the moment, but the cost is the regret of reaching the end of your life and realizing that you played a role for all these people and they thought it was great, and you're left feeling resentful and bitter and realizing no one ever really knew you, including yourself. You never knew yourself as well. Yeah. So that's pretty grim. The next big one, the next cost, is basically your energy. So the need to constantly play a role for the people in your life and uphold what you think they expect of you creates a lot of anxiety in the system. Okay, because we're constantly switched on, we're constantly needing to tune into what do they need, what do they need. Especially if it's in a romantic relationship, it's like you wake up in the morning and the mask is already on, even before you get out of bed. It's draining. It usually leads to other coping mechanisms like escapism or addictions and stuff where we need to escape the role we've been playing, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it gets even more complicated in social gathering situations, such as imagine a birthday party where your football friend, your drinking friend, your girlfriend, and your co-founder all come together, and your mom maybe as well, and you play 5 different roles for the 5 different people, depending. So there's now this situation where all these people come together, and you hope that they don't find out about the different versions of you that you play for each other. So imagine how exhausting that is to play all those different roles and maintain that, and the stress that creates in a time that should be happy.
And also I think the more people have to put on a mask, let's say in a relationship, the more, and it's not like that in all cases, but the more people tend to needing space and time for themselves. I gave this really good example. I heard that once. It's like, okay, when you want to be alone or when you feel like the need to be alone, does that also include your cat or your dog? Like when you're home alone with your cat or your dog, does that count as being alone? And people say, yeah, that counts as being alone. Well, you're not, but the dog or the cat doesn't care who you are, how you act, what you do. They just accept you. So the less, I would say, you can come with your partner to feeling like you're with your cat or with your dog, the more authentic you actually are. And that's not to say that you can't ever do something by yourself. I still think it's nice and healthy. But if it comes like this need, I really need time for myself. It's a good question to ask, I think.
It's very funny. It's almost like wearing a big, heavy costume on a sweaty day, in a hot day, and needing to take off the costume and kind of get some air. And the idea of the pet not judging you. So it's not a case of needing alone time, but it's needing time without playing a role, basically. That's a pretty brutal one for many people, I'd say. So how does this show up in a day-to-day situation when someone is being inauthentic or playing all these different roles? The first main one typically that shows up is inherently a lack of honesty. Because if we're not being ourselves, we're therefore creating some form of little tales or white lies or twisting the truth slightly in order to keep everyone happy. Okay, because that's basically the goal. You might invite me to your birthday party, and deep down, don't take it personally, but deep down I might say, oh, I don't want to go. Okay, but that's not even an option to even admit that to myself. Never mind tell you that. So I will now create an elaborate plan to avoid telling the truth, so you can uphold this mask that I've created of me being this nice, kind, generous person who always shows up, for instance. But as we know, creating that maybe small lie in the moment means that I'm now stressed that for the next week, if you find out that actually I don't have plans or my dog didn't die, like I told you is why I'm not coming, then now I'm constantly on a process of almost like having, done this crime and I'm on the run from the police and they're going to find out about the bad thing I've done kind of thing.
Yeah. I have just one funny thing came to my mind, what I used to do. Sometimes I would say no to people and have some stupid excuse rather than just say, hey, I don't have capacity today or whatever. It doesn't feel right to do that today. I would come up with an excuse, but then I would go somewhere, something that I would usually share on my Instagram story, for example. And then I'm like, oh, I have to hide my story from this person because then they see, actually, I would have had time, but I'm doing something else. And then I think, oh, does this person only have one account or maybe 2? And that the stress that put me under again already to manage that so much more than just say, hey, sorry, I don't want to come. Or like, it's, yeah. By the way, I'm not doing that anymore. But
the web of lies,
Yeah.
And another thing we talked about before, and this is something that I would do as well in the past, is like doing things in advance for other people so that they really like me. Maybe I don't even want to do those things, but so if they had an ask of me later, I would feel more comfortable to then not do it.
Yeah.
Because it's like building up credits in advance almost. And the thing underneath this is like, it's never really doing or saying things that I actually want, but more to get away from being rejected or being ridiculed by them. Not logical kind of reasons, but more just a deep fear of like, if I don't keep this person happy all the time, then something terrible will happen. Like what you're saying there about looking at all these accounts and stuff. What would happen if they actually saw your story and said, huh, you said you were going to, I don't know, wash your car and now you're at this thing not washing your car. What's up? Actually, not much is going to happen. But it's this deep irrational fear that we have underneath that we need to avoid at all costs and not look at, not address, just avoid it. It's like a big elephant in the room that we can't look at. And it's super stressful and creates a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. I think one thing, also a good question to ask yourself again, how authentic are you? Think around topics like political views, for example. Ooh, yeah. This is a great example where people often are so afraid to speak up or say what they think, because that is something you could be really judged for, especially nowadays. Because like talking about your holiday preferences, even if they don't agree that Italy is great, it's not going to hurt you. But if it's something that another person could perceive as negative, then people are often holding back, scanning first, what opinion does this person have? And then again, just managing who they are, which doesn't feel good.
Yeah, totally. And often, as we said before, the cat in that situation is avoidance of conflict or avoidance of being seen as a bad person. Because if someone else holds a strong opinion about something like a charge or a trigger, and I mentioned that actually I like this thing, which maybe some classes of society deem to be bad, or some media outlets or government had said is bad, then it actually creates like a conflict situation where they're maybe triggered or they're angry or they say something back. And then that shatters this amazing image I've built of myself in their eyes of how great I am. So in order to not get that, in order to not be rejected by them, I'm constantly then going to monitor and suppress my own true feelings and beliefs in order to keep everyone happy all the time, which is, again, fucking exhausting. With that as well comes basically different levels of openness and confidence with different people or different groups. So maybe in a work scenario, you feel very confident. You might feel like, yeah, okay, all my team support me, I feel good. For me, it was like, let's say when I was playing music on stage, I was like, I'm great because I knew exactly what to do to make that situation work for me enough times to be confident. But then as soon as I'd get off stage, I would be kind of a bit nervous and a bit awkward because I was only comfortable in that position or in that role. And it can often be the case with people where they might feel very comfortable in a business setting, but then with certain types of investors, they completely go into like a pleasing fawn, or they finish work and go on a date, and then they morph into, again, this like puppy dog, nice guy kind of thing, you know what I mean? Even though they've just been bossing it in the boardroom kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you have an example from your time with your training as well, from going from past life to,
Exactly. Like I was obviously in this travel organizing party environment for many years, and we built a really cool brand. People knew me as the guy from all the videos and social media, and I felt super safe in that role. I knew what to say. Everybody was shoulder patting, best holiday of my life. And I could speak in front of a group of 1,000 people with a microphone at the party, pumping them up. And I would really enjoy it. And I wasn't afraid to be judged because I knew I'm respected and accepted in this position. So my perception of myself, if somebody would have asked me, was, yes, I'm a very confident guy. Because on that island where I had my company and the status, I was very confident. Then came to Bali and did the breathwork training. Suddenly, I found myself in a room of 12 strangers who have nothing to do with the lifestyle I used to live, who are more self-aware, maybe some of them are vegan, maybe many of them don't drink alcohol. And immediately I felt judged and I felt myself shrinking into little boy mode. And when then I just had to introduce myself, my body was under complete stress, heart rate again going up. Like I knew there's 5 people before me introducing themselves, while actually it would have been really interesting to get to know who I'm going to spend the next 3 months with, listening to who they are. I couldn't listen to a word they said because all I was thinking about was, what am I going to say? What is going to be accepted? How am I going to be perceived? And the totally confident guy that I thought I was completely humbled because it was a different situation.
Yeah. And that kind of leads to the next symptom of someone who's wearing masks all the time, or like wearing different personalities for different people, which is seeking social validation. So always in group settings, being on, looking, reading the room and saying, again, who do I need to be in order to win everyone's approval? Now, as you said, in an environment which is known, you know the people, you know the variables, that's fine. I can feel confident. It's easy. I know it. It's good. Now you're in a new environment with people who you don't really know, you haven't had a chance to talk to. You know their values are different. You know that elements of your past life they might judge. And then that creates a feeling of I need to shrink myself down to the most basic variables, which probably isn't very much. So think about, if you're listening back home, any social scenario or setting where you're stepping in and there's people from like a slightly different background, that can lead to a shrinking back to the most vanilla or palatable version of you. And one interesting thing that always happens in our retreats, which is where guys come in and typically they might have their circle and the people they know, and they operate at a certain level of openness, which is not very open. And then in the beginning, there's maybe like the first day or even 2 days where there's like a little bit of awkwardness and not sharing so much. But then at some point they realize there's a switch that flips, and they realize that actually this is a safe environment where I can be really open, because there might be us two, me and René, sharing something. There might also be 1 or 2 guys in the group who've been there before and they're comfortable to share very deeply and openly. And once people start to kind of like get the ball rolling a little bit and get the energy moving, and they start to realize, oh, okay, this guy is sharing some really vulnerable stuff and no one's judging, they're actually like applauding it. Now the social validation goes from being who can be the most perfect to who can be the most open and themselves. And that creates a new experience where guys can actually go from having maybe never shared stuff their whole life, even with their most close people, their closest friends or partner, to sharing with a group of people they've only met a few days before, because there's a permission inherently in the room that this is okay. And that's completely the opposite of how maybe some of these guys have been living their whole life, which is, who do I need to be to win their acceptance? But it's like an interesting change around where they're now actually being invited to be themselves and being applauded for being more true and honest about who they really are.
And I think it's one of these things that most people don't even know they're missing, because it's not on the menu. We don't
never know it.
Yeah, we never know what that feels like, that it could actually be that way. And I think that's why consistently at the end of every retreat, everybody just sits there in the circle and just expresses so much gratefulness and like, wow, I've never been able to show myself in that way, and I didn't even know that it can feel that good. And that is one of the most valuable things I think people take with them. This, besides all the content, the personal learnings, the insights, but this feeling of being accepted and that I'm good the way I am.
Yeah. So some of the side effects or symptoms of never truly being yourself. The first one we've spoken about is basically constant anxiety and stress, so always being on. And then there's a lot of knock-on effects that happen. So you might say anxiety, stress, sure, it happens, it's normal in business or whatever, but think about not being able to sleep properly, or not being able to unwind or spend time with your loved ones. I know you've had the experience in the past of like just having little sickness all the time and never really having any explanation why. And then as soon as you start being more and more yourself, it's like suddenly it goes away, because the energy that's previously being routed into maintaining all these different personas for different people can be brought back and kind of stored in the central system, and then used much more for like, okay, being healthy and what do I need and want, and looking after my needs, which is also a big symptom of someone who isn't that authentic. It's being run down and spending energy and time upholding what other people need instead of what I need. The other one is, of course, overthinking, which is like, what do other people feel? Do they like what I say? Did I wear that mask appropriately for that person? Replaying situations in the head, or thinking about what I'm going to do with this next situation when all these people who I have different personas with come together. All of that overthinking actually is time and energy not being spent productively on things that are meaningful. So actually it's a full-time job maintaining all these masks for people, and we're using the energy that could be used towards what we're really passionate about and is meaningful to us. Instead, we're using it just to almost maintain a baseline feeling of like everyone is okay with me and no one rejects me or is angry at me. And once we kind of move past that and get over that overthinking and that anxiety, it's amazing how quickly things can change for people, where they let go of this need to always prove people. Like we had an example, one client of constantly needing to be liked online on LinkedIn, let's say, you know, and then by actually being able to look at this and let go of this need to always be validated, suddenly he starts producing all this amazing content and getting all this traction online because he's no longer afraid of what people could say.
Yeah, he was watering it down, basically. He was making sure, he said, I was reading every post 5 times through before I posted it to read it from different people's perspective, like scanning for anything that could be attacked, disagreed with. If there was like something factual in there, he would really make sure that this is really factually true. I mean, it's not a bad thing necessarily,
Sure,
but
yeah.
like really making sure so nobody could attack his expert status. And even like, yeah, some personal opinion about something, like no strong opinions, which of course are not that appealing because it's watered down, it's generic. But then he had a lot of great things to say. And once he was feeling in the breathwork sessions, you know what, fuck it what people think. I believe in myself. I believe that I have good intentions and I have something to give to the world. And he started to do that, sending out newsletters and so on. And bam, revenue just skyrocketed.
Totally. So another thing that particular client was doing that we also see quite often is having different coping mechanisms to deal with maintaining a lot of these masks. It's very draining and, as you said, tiring to always wear all these masks. So we kind of need to create these escapes from that. And one of the biggest ones is alcohol. It's why a lot of people around the world, I would say, like to drink. You know, they might say it's because they like to let off steam, which is the cheese, you know. But actually the cat, I would say, is, you know, not having to feel all the stuff that's in the background that they're avoiding. And the chance to finally let loose and be themselves and let go of this anxiety and all the stuff that's built up in the background. It's like that example of being alone with their dog or cat. It's also a chance to then, if they go and do something crazy, they can blame that behavior on the alcohol. So even if they're judged by others, they can just say, well, it wasn't me. Okay. So there's a freedom that comes with that, which is why I think it's such a common and popular thing. And think about any other escape addictions like porn or social media and different forms of drugs and stuff, or even, you know, work or email as well. These are all just symptoms, I would say, of someone who's just overloaded and not comfortable to just be themselves or with themselves. And we can judge the behavior like the addiction, say, oh, it's bad to drink, or you shouldn't be doing that. Or people might even say, oh, it's not good. I have this like addiction to watching porn and I can't tell anyone about it. I'm really ashamed of it. And it's like, well, we can judge the surface level symptom, but if we understand what's happening at the core, which is this massive fear of letting anyone down and upholding this image, then it actually makes total sense why, in that case, the nervous system has found an outlet that allows it to take just a moment, you know, or some minutes to itself, okay, to almost like have a release and a recharge so they can then maintain this thing, because otherwise they would just crash and burn. So when we judge the symptom or the behavior and say it's bad, we're not always looking at what's the root cause or what's happening underneath. Another big symptom of this is never being able to truly say no. And we mentioned this before, but like a short-term avoidance of the pain of letting someone down or hurting their feelings or them seeing us as a bad person in some way. But in that we're avoiding being truly honest and basically delaying or offsetting the negative thing.
Yeah, that's the one thing I told you yesterday, the delaying the no. It's almost like, well, if I say no, I have to at least give them something nice to water. Like I can't just simply say no. I have to explain it, or maybe say, hey, not tomorrow, but next time, because I'm busy now. But often, even with things I already know I don't want to do next time either, but I just can't sit with the clear no. So I have to give them something. And then next time the message pops up, I already get an uncomfortable feeling. I'm like, oh, now I have to come up with another excuse and another excuse. And it's just, again, draining energy. And then we come to the next point, which is ghosting. And I think this is super interesting because ghosting, I think many people would agree that it's very uncomfortable to be on the receiving end of being ghosted. And some of the things we would experience if we were being ghosted is frustration, anger, or thinking, oh, this person is full of themselves, thinks that are better than me, don't respect me, all of these things. But I think very often it's just because they're so afraid of conflict. They don't think they're better than you. I think especially also in dating with many guys, women asking me, why are all these guys ghosting? And I said, well, some really might not care. Some might be narcissists, don't give a fuck about how you feel. But many guys are actually afraid to say, hey, look, I'm just not that interested. Or, hey, this doesn't work for me. they would do anything to avoid having to face the negative emotion or any pushback, because maybe you say, oh, I also didn't like the thing you did. So it's much easier just to say nothing and ghost and tell yourself, oh, well, maybe it wasn't that serious anyways. She'll get the point.
Sweep it under the carpet.
It's not that bad. But the truth is they're just so afraid.
Also afraid of being seen as a bad guy. If they reject someone, then they cause pain to them. That's like the fear. Usually, though, that's a projection, because for those guys, and I've been this guy as well in the past, it's so much fear of being rejected myself. How hurt I would be if someone said, I don't like you, you know?
Yeah.
So it's actually like not doing the thing that we need to do for fear of how they'll react, because of how we believe we would react in that situation, which is quite messed up. So look, if you're listening to any of this and saying, okay, I definitely do this, I definitely change myself around people, I'm not being authentic, and how do I change it? So there's 3, I would say, key ingredients to authenticity in this case. The first one is just bringing awareness to it. If you're not aware of what's happening under the hood, you can't change it. So if you're listening to this, drawing parallel lines between different situations in your life, or recognizing, yes, I do that, yes, that resonates, then you're already bringing awareness, which is the first step to becoming more authentic, which is great. Second one is starting to be what we can say more honest and vulnerable. So once you know what's happening and who you are and what you want, we can start assessing how honestly do you show up in your life? How real and open and vulnerable are you, including with sharing your flaws or sharing about what's happening on a deeper level. So when someone says to you, hey, what's going on? How you doing? Like, tell me about what's happening in your life. You say, yeah, it's all good. Yeah, everything's fine. That's what we would call a 1 chili share. If you think of 5 chilies being like level 5, if you go to an Asian restaurant and ask for a 5 chili spicy dish, then you're going to get a very fucking spicy dish. So the idea of 1 chili being it's not very spicy, but challenging yourself to start to be a little bit more open and share a little bit more of like, actually, yeah, maybe everything isn't perfect, and just starting to get that feedback loop of sharing with those people, maybe not what you think they want to hear, but what you actually feel, and creating maybe a new scenario where people might actually validate that and say, wow, that's amazing. And they might even give you juicy or vulnerable
They'll
back.
also open up,
Totally.
Obviously, it depends on the situation. We can't always tell them our life story and pain in the supermarket.
Yeah.
But it's funny, I actually noticed since we're doing this work, obviously every single conversation we have with a client is very deep, open. So now if I meet somebody and they ask me, how are you? And I'm not doing that well, it's almost impossible for me to say good. Like the usual good that I always used to say, it feels very uncomfortable. It feels very inauthentic, and I only do that if I really have to, if there's no time or whatever. And yeah, just such a shift, because I used to say good 100 times a day, running the travel business, when everybody, hey, how are you? They don't even want to actually know how you are, No.
The last part then, which is what you were speaking to there, is this concept of once you've become to be more honest, more open, more vulnerable, it's starting to bring in this concept of integrity, which is aligning who you are and how you present yourself on the outside with how you actually feel on the inside. So of course, getting to know who you really are on the inside is a journey and a process in itself, and it's something that we've had a fine journey with over the past decade, you could say. And also one thing that in our online offerings and in our retreats, that's something that we really love to guide guys through, because there's often just a couple of really small, simple switches we can flip in order to just create massive change right away. Because usually a lot of, let's say, entrepreneur kind of driven, more achieving focused guys, they usually are very good at, like, once they get the hang of something, just applying it right away and changing something big in their life, and they just need the little reflection or a little quick win in order to do that. So by starting to recognize who we are and what we want in life, the process of them starting to share that with the world is, and deciding to basically live from a place of integrity, which is alignment between who I am inside and who I present on the outside. Of course, it's a journey, and it can be edgy and scary. Every time we share a little bit more of ourselves in a scary environment, it brings up all the anxiety and stuff. But it is such a rewarding journey, because number one, we get to stop wearing the masks and spending all this energy trying to pretend. And secondly, we start to actually be loved and accepted for who we are. And that is the definition of freedom. It's the freedom to be myself fully without needing to think about it or manage it or, any of that. And oftentimes what I found in my life was I was doing all these external things to be liked and to feel worthy or good enough, but it's actually a reverse engineer job. It's like I actually need to just go inward and find worthiness in myself, and then the rest of the stuff just comes.
Yeah, and I think by being really authentic, by being really honest, it's such a super tool for deeper connection, better relationships, more trust. People really trust you more. And yes, some people will not be able to deal with that honesty. That's also true. And that's where you're saying you need to be okay with yourself, within yourself, because then that's not that important anymore. And you go from, oh my God, they think poorly about me now, to, okay, great, this person is not somebody I want to have in my life anyways, if they don't accept me for that. And I think, though, what is very, very important in this context is good communication. And that's also why we talk a lot about tools and communication tools and how we can actually express ourselves in a way in our community, because it does make a difference. Because it can be confronting for people when you suddenly show up as yourself.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging, but there's ways to say things that make it easy for the other person, and of course then also are going to make your experience of it better, because for you it will also be not the easiest thing to do in the start. So positive experiences will support your journey and keep doing it. Yeah. And good communication is really powerful.
Totally. So the journey to that is very simple. Let's assume that at our core, when you were born and brought into the world, you were authentic. You were yourself. If you were hungry, you cried. If you were happy, you laughed. That was it, okay? And at some point we learned, or we were conditioned that we need to change who we are and how we feel in order to be liked and accepted by those around us, so we can survive and not be rejected. So our natural state, if we strip everything back, is just to be ourselves. So it's not about going to some authenticity workshop and learning how do I become more authentic and say these things which are authentic. It's actually about removing the blocks to inauthenticity. So stripping away those masks that we've built up that we believed we needed to wear in order to get our needs met. Okay. The main way we can start to do this is basically by becoming aware of the situations in which we change ourselves, and start to notice that anxiety, notice the fear, notice the shame, the fears of being rejected, let's say, or the fears of negative consequences that could happen if we don't play this role, and start to, as we examine the deeper reasons why, we can start to look at, okay, what is it in me that's creating that? And if that wasn't there, if I could change or let go of this, how would my interaction with this person in front of me change? So 2 real world experiments that we're going to leave you with in order to test how much masks am I wearing, or how authentic am I being. The first one is called the calendar test. Okay. So what I want you to do is, if you have your phone or you're at your computer, I want you to pull up your Google Calendar or whatever calendar you use on your phone. And I want you to look at the next 10 meetings you have in your calendar. So this one's a little bit more business focused, but it can also include personal meetings as well. So of the 10 meetings you have on your calendar, how excited, out of a score of 0 to 10, are you to do that meeting? And how authentic do you think you can show up in that meeting? So if it's someone that you can be fully open and honest with and share everything, and it's really you're on good terms, it would be like a 9 or a 10. And if you feel like you have to fully play a mask and a role, and the only way that meeting actually doesn't break down in chaos and you never see that person again is by wearing a complete mask and not being authentic, then it would be like a 0 or a 1. Okay, so go through your calendar and rate each of those meetings that you have booked in. And once you have the numbers for each one, I want you to go then through again and see what would it be like to go from where I'm at now to maybe adding 1 or 2 more authenticity points. Okay, so if it's a 4, how could you bring it to like a 5 or a 6? What's something you could share or try in that meeting that would actually open things up a bit more? And just see how it actually lands when you do it. See if you like share something that maybe you wouldn't. Usually you only talk business, but you share 1 or 2 personal things, and just see how it lands. See if it changes anything. For some people, maybe they don't. It's neutral or a negative reaction, but for most people, it will actually deepen and create more connection out of that. Then the second test, which is also really juicy, is the WhatsApp test. So open up your WhatsApp and take the last 10 messages that you have, again, from more personal people in your life. So friends, family, relationships, etc. And again, you want to look through it and see how honest, from a score of 0 to 10, do you feel you can be with this person? So, for instance, one statement is like, would you feel good to tell this person that I've been stressed or tired lately? That would be probably like 1 or 2 out of 10. If the maximum you could share was like, oh yeah, I feel stressed. Maybe if you can tell them that you feel really upset or angry about something. Yeah, I'm pretty pissed off about this thing and I'm really actually sad. That could be like a 5 or a 6, or even a 7 of openness and authenticity. And then imagine you have like a very deep, shameful secret or fear that you would never really share with anyone, but then you would feel comfortable to share it with this person in your WhatsApp thread. That would probably be like a 9 or a 10. So again, the invitation is to go through, rank each person with a score, and then look at how could I share something in the next interaction with this person that would open things up a little bit more and create slightly more, it's create a new experience of vulnerability and authenticity, taking down the mask so I can prove to myself that actually there's a different way of being and it's actually safe to be more of myself than I previously thought.
I just wanted, before we go, I wanted to add something to what you said before. Last week, I met my mom's boyfriend's daughter's kid. So I'm kind of the uncle, and I haven't been around babies a lot, but I was exactly thinking about this thing. I looked into the eyes of the baby, and it was so clean, so innocent, just exploring, no judgment, and crying, laughing. I just thought, this is what it looks like when you're fully yourself, knowing all these patterns and stuff that we work with now. And I caught myself thinking, like, when does the shift happen? When along the way of this little being, it becomes visible that we change ourselves into who the world wants us to be? And I think that is such a important notion for these people who have resistance towards personal development, or when they get other people saying things to them, why do you want to change me? Because technically, a critic could say to us, why do you need to change people? Why do you want to change people? But for me, it's the total opposite. It's like getting them away from changing, coming back to who you are.
Why did you change yourself in the first place?
Yeah, it's not changing you, it's like bringing you home. So I think that's really important because it's a much more positive way to look at it, and it's also the truth.
Amen to that. One of the things we love to do most is with our different various offerings, the retreats as well, is basically create spaces where we give people the invitation and the permission to come home to themselves and to be more of that authentic version, to take off the masks and to be seen. And I think even having 1 or 2 lived experiences of opening up deeper and sharing at that 10 out of 10 authenticity, or 5 chilies, of authenticity, it creates a new standard for what's possible, because you then realize, okay, my whole life I thought I could only share up to 4 out of 10. That was safe. Everything else is off the table. I just had 8 out of 10 and people are like patting me on the back and saying, wow. So now that creates a new standard, a new definition of what you will rate your friendships and relationships by, and also attracting other people who only accept that level of openness as well. So it goes from the situation of feeling like I can never be open to I expect openness from myself and from others. And for me, that actually takes the focus away from, I need to create all these outcomes in my life, this success, this amazing thing, in order to then be loved and accepted. It's like, it's available right now. And the key is actually unlocking that within myself and coming home more and more to myself, and therefore being a magnet for that in others, both people who are in my life already and also new people who come in. So I think that's a nice place to leave it there today. If you've enjoyed the episode, then we hope you'll continue to listen and watch.
Thanks for being here, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day and see you next time.